It started with a champagne toast. My sister Layla clinked her glass against mine, her diamond ring flashing so hard I had to squint. "To new beginnings," she said, and gave me that smile, tight-lipped, glossy, fake. The kind she used when she was performing, which was most of the time. I still remember thinking how surreal it felt to be standing in her marble-tiled kitchen, sipping expensive bubbles from real crystal, surrounded by people who probably didn't know the difference between me and one of the caterers. I'm Eddie. I'm 31. No wife, no kids, no shiny job title. I work as a freelance videographer, which is code for broke unless I land a wedding gig or a low-budget commercial. But I like what I do. I like being behind the camera, out of focus. Not like Layla, who's been center stage since we were kids. Layla is 5 years older than me. Growing up, she was the golden child. You know the type. Straight A's, head cheerleader, prom queen, student council president. She collected titles like Pokemon cards. My parents adored her. They'd put her achievements on the fridge like museum pieces. Me? I got, "Eddie, can you not embarrass your sister at dinner tonight?" Or, "Eddie, stop filming everything and go make some real friends." I learned early on that my role was the sidekick in the Layla show. Always filming, never starring. But I didn't hate her. I mean, we were siblings. She had her world, I had mine. And as long as I stayed out of her spotlight, we coexisted. Then she married Grant. Grant was the curveball. A quiet tech guy who'd sold some startup I couldn't even pretend to understand and made millions before he turned 35. He wasn't flashy, didn't care about status, and honestly, he didn't seem like Layla's type. But somehow, they ended up together. Layla rebranded herself overnight into the image of a modest tech wife. No more wild parties or reality TV drama. Now it was yoga, charity luncheons, organic baby food, even though they didn't have kids, and curated Instagram posts of her minimalist lifestyle. When they bought the mansion in Monterey, that's when the family dynamics shifted. Suddenly, my parents were acting like they'd always known Layla would marry rich. My mom practically floated around her kitchen after visiting them for the first time, saying things like, "Our Layla really knew how to choose a husband, didn't she?" Dad followed suit. He used to tell me, "Money doesn't buy happiness," but now he was grinning ear to ear when Grant paid for dinner. And me? I became the weird little brother again. The one who brought a GoPro to Thanksgiving. The first hint something was off came at a family barbecue last summer. Layla had invited everyone to her place for a 4th of July bash. It was way over the top, private chef, fireworks, even a rented bounce house for our cousin's kids. I showed up with a six-pack and a smile, already expecting to feel out of place. At some point during the afternoon, I was on the patio filming some slow-motion footage of the fireworks setup, just for fun, maybe for a montage later, when Layla walked over, drink in hand, and leaned in. "Eddie," she said sweetly, but with that edge in her voice I recognized from childhood. "Maybe don't film everything today, yeah? This isn't one of your little projects." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but her face didn't change. "Grant invited a few people from work. I just don't want this to feel amateurish. You get it, right?" I blinked. "I'm not filming the guests. Just the setup." "I know. But still, try not to make it weird." That word, weird, hit me harder than it should have. It brought back every teenage insecurity I thought I'd outgrown. Every time she'd brush me off at school. Every time she'd told her friends I was just her half-brother, even though we shared both parents. Still, I nodded and put the camera away. The rest of the night, I walked around like a ghost, watching her play hostess, dazzling Grant's co-workers with her polished laugh and expensive dress. She looked like she belonged, like she'd always belonged. I didn't stay long. Told her I had an early client meeting the next day, even though I didn't. As I was leaving, Grant stopped me by the driveway. "Hey," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Thanks for coming, Eddie. It was nice seeing you." He said it like he meant it, too. Grant was different. He noticed things, like how I hung back during dinner, or how Layla talked over me when I tried to answer a question. He once asked me about a video I'd posted online, one of my better ones, a documentary-style piece about street musicians in San Francisco, and I was surprised he'd even watched it. Most people in my family hadn't. That was the first time I saw the crack in Layla's perfect life. She had everything, the house, the money, the status. But she didn't have Grant's attention, not really. And I don't think she could stand that. The next few months were quiet. I didn't hear much from Layla, which wasn't unusual. But then I got a call from my mom in September. "Did you hear?" she said, excitement bubbling in her voice. Layla's flying to Cabo with her girlfriends. First class, all paid for. Can you imagine? Grant is so generous. I played along, but something about the way she emphasized girlfriends rubbed me the wrong way. Layla didn't have many close friends. Not real ones. And Cabo? The curiosity got the better of me. I started checking her Instagram. At first, it was the usual, photos of sunsets, brunches, cocktails by the beach. But then I noticed something weird. A guy appeared in several of the pictures. Not tagged. Not mentioned. Just there, in reflections, background shots. Even once in a boomerang where they were clearly drinking shots together. Definitely not one of her girlfriends. I let it sit for a while. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe it was nothing. But then I got a message that changed everything. And that's when the real story began. 2 weeks after the Cabo trip, I got a DM from someone I didn't recognize. Username was something like it Brittany with 3 T's. I almost ignored it, assuming it was spam. But the message preview stopped me cold. Hey, not sure if this is weird, but I think your sister is cheating on her husband. I opened it, heart kicking up a notch. Inside were 4 photos, low quality, grainy, taken at night, but unmistakably of Layla. In one, she was leaning over a restaurant patio table, holding hands with a guy who definitely wasn't Grant. In another, she was in a pool with him, arms around his neck. The last 2 were blurry but showed them kissing on a beach at sunset. The message continued. I was on the same resort as your sister in Cabo. We were following each other on IG for a bit through a mutual friend. I recognized her from her stories. Saw her with this guy all week. Thought you should know. I stared at those photos for what felt like hours. My thoughts spun in every direction. At first, I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it was a business meeting, a friend, a coincidence. But the pictures didn't lie, and neither did her posts. When I went back to check, all her Instagram stories that week had been carefully framed to avoid showing who she was actually with. No group shots, no selfies with friends. Just carefully cropped ocean views and cheers boomerangs. I didn't respond to the girl who messaged me. I just sat in my apartment, laptop still open from editing a client video, trying to process what this meant. For Grant. For me. For my family. It wasn't just that Layla was cheating. It was how calculated it all felt. The manipulation. The presentation. She knew exactly how to make it all look innocent, even while living a double life. I kept quiet at first. What else could I do? It's not like anyone would believe me over Layla. My whole life, she'd had this grip over the family's perception. If I so much as suggested she'd done something wrong, my parents would act like I was jealous. Bitter. Unsuccessful. And sure enough, the next weekend, I got the usual guilt trip invite to another family dinner. Layla's idea, held at a fancy restaurant downtown. I showed up late on purpose. Everyone was already seated when I walked in. Layla smiled like nothing had happened. She wore a white silk blouse and gold earrings that caught the candlelight. Grant sat next to her, relaxed, sipping wine. My mom beamed at the both of them, like they were royalty. There he is, my dad said, waving me over. Eddie, we were just talking about your video work. Layla says you're working on something for a travel company. Yeah, I said, sitting down. Doing a few promos for small hotels on the coast. Layla tilted her head. That's cute. I ignored her. The conversation drifted, and I mostly stayed quiet. But at one point, Grant leaned toward me and said, You ever film in Mexico? Like, resort content. I paused. My eyes flicked toward Layla, who stiffened almost imperceptibly. Not yet, I said. But I've seen some interesting footage from Cabo recently. Layla's fork froze midway to her mouth. Our eyes met. I saw the flicker of panic behind her lashes, so fast most people would miss it. But I didn't. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grant. About the way he'd looked at me when he asked about Mexico. It almost felt like he knew. Or suspected. The next day, I made a decision that changed everything. I emailed the photos to myself, printed out a few copies, and tucked them into a manila folder. Old school. No text trail, no digital signature. I figured if I was going to do this, I had to do it smart. But even with that folder in hand, it took me a full week to act. I kept going back and forth. Was it really my place? What if Grant turned on me? What if Layla denied everything and made me look like the villain? I could already hear my mom. Why would you do this to your sister? Then came the breaking point. One afternoon, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off an old camcorder they wanted to donate. When I walked in, I heard them in the living room, talking in hushed, conspiratorial tones. I slowed down and listened from the hallway. I just think it's best if we don't tell Eddie about the house, my mom said. You know how sensitive he gets. The inheritance is Layla's now anyway, Dad added. Grant's setting up the whole thing for them. It's only fair. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. What house? I stepped in before I could think better of it. What inheritance? They both jumped. Oh, my mom said quickly, Eddie, we didn't hear you come in. I walked over, arms crossed. What inheritance? She hesitated. Your grandfather's lake house. Remember how we said we weren't sure what to do with it? Yeah. Well, we decided it made sense for Layla to have it. She and Grant can actually use it. You don't even drive up that way. My dad added. Besides, Grant said he'd take care of the renovations. It'll add value to the whole family estate. I stared at them. So you're just giving it to her? She's married now, Eddie, my mom said gently, like she was explaining something obvious. She has responsibilities. And I don't. They exchanged looks. Then my dad said, you have your own life. You're free-spirited. You wouldn't want to be tied down with property taxes. That was the moment it all clicked into place. Layla wasn't just cheating. She was manipulating everything, everyone, to funnel the family legacy into her perfect little life. And they were all eating it up. I left without saying another word. I didn't go home. I drove straight to Grant's office. He worked in a quiet building near the edge of town, the kind of place with frosted glass doors and people who wore headphones all day. I waited outside in the lobby until his assistant asked if I had an appointment. No, I said, but he'll want to see me. Tell him it's about Layla. That got his attention. 10 minutes later, I was in his office. It was minimal, just like their house. Clean desk, 2 chairs, no clutter. Eddie, he said, clearly puzzled. Everything okay? I didn't speak right away. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, and slid it across the desk. Grant looked at it for a moment before opening it. As his eyes moved across the photos, the silence in the room thickened. When he looked up, his face was unreadable. When were these taken? During her Cabo trip. 2 weeks ago. He stared at the images a while longer, then leaned back in his chair. Do you know who he is? No idea. He nodded once, slowly, like something had just fallen into place in his mind. I thought so, he said softly. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and said, thank you. I was caught off guard. You're not mad? At me? Grant shook his head. You're the only one who's ever been honest with me. He stood up, walked to the window, hands in his pockets. After a long pause, he said, this stays between us. For now. You didn't see anything. You didn't say anything. Got it, I said quietly. And just like that, I was dismissed. I left with my heart pounding. I didn't know what he planned to do, or when, but I knew something big was coming. What I didn't expect was how quickly Layla would find out, and how explosively she'd react. It started with a voicemail. Her voice, shrill and shaking, screaming, what did you do? I listened to it 3 times. Then my phone buzzed again, with a bank notification I had to read twice to believe. Grant had wired me $1 million. And that wasn't even the part that broke her. That came later. I didn't touch the money at first. The moment that wire transfer hit my account, I sat there in total disbelief, refreshing the balance like maybe I'd imagined it. A full $1 million. Exactly that. No cents. No note. No explanation. Just Grant Bennett, $1 million. It didn't feel real. I wasn't even sure it was legal. I thought about calling the bank to verify it wasn't a mistake, but a part of me knew it wasn't. This was Grant's way of speaking without saying a word. A thank you. A full circle kind of statement. Quiet. Powerful. Unmistakable. Then the call started. Layla left 2 more voicemails that night, both escalating. The first one was confused, half pleading. Eddie, please. Call me. I need to know what's going on. The second one was angrier, her words sharp like broken glass. You've ruined everything. Everything. You don't understand what you've done. I didn't respond. I just sat in my tiny apartment. Cracked linoleum floors, secondhand couch, camera gear stacked in crates along the walls, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. My thoughts were a storm of guilt, satisfaction, fear, and something else I couldn't quite name. Relief, maybe. The next morning, I woke up to a dozen text messages from my mom. All in a row, like she was typing through clenched teeth. Call me now. What did you say to your sister? Layla is devastated. You're tearing this family apart. You better fix this. This is why no one trusts you. That one stung. I didn't respond to her either. Not out of malice. I just didn't know what to say. Everything I had ever done to keep the peace, to stay in my lane, to avoid rocking the boat. It all felt meaningless now. Like I had spent years watering a dead plant. And the thing is, I did hit a kind of rock bottom after that. Not because of what I'd done. I don't regret telling Grant the truth. But what followed was a complete unraveling. My family turned on me instantly. The same people who used to forget I existed suddenly remembered me as a threat. My dad sent me a long-winded email trying to mediate, which really meant telling me how disappointed he was and suggesting I apologize to Layla and make things right before more damage is done. My mom took it further. She actually showed up at my door one morning, unannounced, arms crossed, hair in perfect rollers like she'd walked out of 1997. She didn't even say hello. Did you really have to ruin her marriage, Eddie? I blinked. Come in, I guess. She stood in the doorway like the floor was lava. Layla is heartbroken. You blindsided her. And Grant, of all people, do you know how good he's been to her? Do you know how hard she's worked to? To what? I cut in. To hide the fact that she's been cheating on him for months. Her eyes narrowed like I'd insulted the Pope. People make mistakes, she said. You don't blow up your own sister's life over a mistake. She didn't make a mistake, Mom. She made a choice. Repeatedly. She went on vacation with the guy. She posted fake Instagram stories. She let you and Dad believe she was living some perfect storybook life while she was lying to all of us. Don't you raise your voice at me, she snapped, stepping in now. You think you're some kind of hero? You think Grant gave you that money because he respects you? You don't earn respect by stabbing your sister in the back. It hit me right then that my mom didn't care about the cheating. She didn't even deny it. She just couldn't stand that the illusion was broken and that I was the one who broke it. After she left, slamming the door so hard one of my picture frames fell, I sat on the floor and realized I was alone. Like, really alone. No backup. No family group chat. No invitations to Sunday brunch. They'd closed ranks around Layla faster than I could blink. It was a few weeks of that, being the family pariah. And yet, something strange started happening. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't wallowing or regretting anything. In fact, I started feeling free. I upgraded my camera. I bought a new editing rig that didn't sound like a jet engine every time I opened Adobe Premiere. I didn't go crazy. I didn't buy a Lamborghini or rent a penthouse. But I allowed myself some dignity. A new mattress. Decent lighting. Good headphones. Things that made me feel like my work, and by extension actually mattered. Then I started booking jobs. Real ones. I'd made a few low-budget travel videos before, but with my upgraded gear, and let's be honest, more free time now that my weekends weren't spent smiling awkwardly at Layla's parties, I started pouring myself into my projects. I pitched a mini documentary to a boutique hotel in Big Sur. They loved it. Paid me up front. It got picked up by a local tourism site. Then a winery reached out. Then a wedding planner. Then a real estate company. Word spread fast. People loved the work. Said it felt honest. Said it had soul. I wasn't just filming pretty shots. I was telling stories. And somewhere in the middle of all this quiet growth, I realized something that hit me like a gut punch. I had spent years trying to be worthy of a seat at my family's table, when I should have been building my own. One night, while editing a piece about a retired fisherman who turned his boat into a floating B&B, I got a text from an unknown number. You really think that money makes you better than me? I didn't need a name to know it was Layla. You're a fraud, she followed up. You filmed weddings. You're not better than anyone. I stared at those messages for a long time. Then I typed something and deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. I finally settled on. I didn't take anything from you. Maybe that's the part that bothers you. She didn't respond. But that night, for the first time in a long time, I slept 8 hours straight. As the weeks passed, I kept rebuilding. Quietly. Privately. I started taking long walks on weekdays, just because I could. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes, waiting for family approval that wasn't coming. I even got invited to speak at a local creative seminar. A small thing, sure, but I stood on a stage in front of 30 people and talked about my work. My voice didn't shake once. Then came the call that changed everything again. It was from Grant. I hadn't heard from him since the day I dropped off the folder. I figured he'd moved on, relocated, maybe even left the country. But he called, and his voice was calm, centered. I'm finalizing the divorce, he said. It'll be done by next week. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I'm sorry it came to that. Don't be, he said. You gave me the only truth I've had in years. We talked for a while after that. He asked how I was doing. I told him I'd been working more, that things were better, that I felt lighter. Then, almost as an afterthought, he said, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. I sat up straighter. Wait, why? I'm putting you in charge of a small media fund I've been meaning to launch. For independent storytellers. People like you. My brain short-circuited. You don't have to do that, I said. I know, he replied. That's why I want to. After the call ended, I just sat there for a long time, staring at my wall. Not because of the money, not because of the opportunity, but because someone finally saw me, really saw me, and didn't ask me to shrink to fit their world. And that's when Layla found out. I didn't mean for her to. I didn't post about it. I didn't brag or rub it in. But news like that has a way of traveling. She called again. I didn't answer. She showed up. This time at my apartment door, same way Mom had weeks earlier. But Layla didn't knock. She banged. Over and over, until I finally opened it. Her face was red, mascara smudged. Her voice shook with fury. That money should have been mine, Eddie. I looked at her, and all I could think was, she really believes that. She stepped forward, eyes wild. You're nothing. You were always nothing. You didn't earn this. You stole it. You think because Grant liked you for 5 minutes that you get to live in my world. I didn't say anything. She kept going. You humiliated me. You destroyed my marriage. You made me look like a fool. That's when I finally spoke. You did that all by yourself, Layla. And that broke her. She stood there, breathing hard, unable to come up with a retort for the first time in her life. Her hands clenched and unclenched. Her lips trembled. She turned and walked away without another word. But she wasn't done. Not even close. If Layla had just walked away that night and left things be, I might have let it all go. I really might have. But Layla doesn't walk away from anything. She circles. She watches. And then she strikes back when she thinks you've stopped paying attention. 2 weeks after her meltdown at my door, I started noticing things. Strange things. A brand new wedding videographer in my town suddenly popped up with a copycat reel, same editing style, same fonts, even the same camera angles I'd made part of my signature. At first, I figured it was coincidence. Or flattery. But then I checked the videographer's About Me section and saw a familiar face. Brendan Harris. Brendan was a guy I'd helped train last year. He'd shadowed me for 3 weddings. I'd taught him how to color correct properly, how to use a gimbal without looking like he was filming during an earthquake. He didn't have a creative bone in his body, but he could follow directions. I'd even loaned him gear once. So why now? Why this sudden glow up, with techniques I hadn't even made public? Then I got my answer. A mutual acquaintance sent me a screenshot of Layla's Instagram story. A boomerang of her clinking champagne glasses with Brendan. Caption: excited to invest in creative talent. Big things coming. She wasn't just mocking me. She was actively trying to replace me. And she knew exactly where to hit me. Not through the courts. Not through family drama. But through my work. My identity. My craft. Layla had always been calculated, but this was something else. This was revenge, her version of it, anyway. Corporate, subtle, dressed in influencer hashtags and fake empowerment slogans. But I didn't panic. Because I'd changed, too. A few months earlier, that kind of betrayal would have gutted me. But now, it just lit a fire. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't post some passive-aggressive caption or call Brendan out. I knew that if I wanted to win this war, I had to play it smart. Strategic. So I started setting up my pieces. First, I leaned into my existing work. I launched a mini-campaign called Stories That Matter. I filmed short, intimate videos of local artists, chefs, and small business owners. Real people with real grit. I didn't charge them a dime. I just asked for permission to share their stories on my platform. The series blew up. Within a month, my inbox was full of requests, small brands, travel groups, even a lifestyle magazine asking to feature me. The algorithm gods smiled down on me, and I gained thousands of new followers who weren't just watching. They were connecting. But I still needed something bigger. A move she wouldn't see coming. Then Grant called. I heard about Layla's new videographer, he said, voice flat with amusement. She's getting desperate. She's trying to white label my work, I replied. But it's fine. I've got something brewing. He hesitated. You know, I've got something, too. What do you mean? He told me about the gala. Apparently, every year, a nonprofit Layla used to donate to, the Coastal Foundation for Literacy and Arts, held a black tie charity event. Big donors, local press, socialites and business owners sipping wine while pretending they cared about school libraries. Layla had hosted it the last 2 years in Grant's name. She'd always positioned herself as the philanthropic wife, beaming in every photo, giving short speeches about the power of community. I never attended. It wasn't my scene, but this year, Grant was the head sponsor, and he'd quietly removed Layla's name from everything. She doesn't know yet, he said. I'm waiting to announce the new keynote speaker publicly. I laughed. You're replacing her? He chuckled. No, you are. I froze. Wait. What? You're the keynote. You'll show your documentary work. Talk about digital storytelling, representation, community narratives. Whatever you want. You'll have 10 minutes on stage. They're expecting a polished, respected creative voice from the region. That's you now. I sat back, stunned. She's going to explode. I know, he said calmly. That's the idea. And just like that, the final piece clicked into place. But I wasn't done yet. If I was going to take the stage at the same event Layla once ruled, I had to own it. Not just as the new creative in town, but as someone who had earned their place. So I pulled every favor I had. I called my old professor from college, the one who used to run a film program in LA. He agreed to send over a few advanced short film students to assist me for the month. Then I reached out to a friend at a boutique ad agency who helped me brand the campaign. Hidden Hands, the unseen stories of Monterey. It wasn't about flash. It was about truth. The raw, unfiltered moments that big money storytelling often skips over. Immigrant bakers, deaf artists, a retired Navy vet who took up pottery to cope with PTSD. I filmed like I was possessed. Day after day, from sunrise to dusk. I got up early, stayed up late, skipped meals, ignored calls. I wasn't doing it for clout or likes. I was doing it because I had something to say. Meanwhile, Layla kept posting photo shoots in overpriced outfits. Behind the scenes, reels of Brendan filming stage proposals on the beach. Hashtags like hashtag empowerment, hashtag support local, hashtag boss babe. But the content felt hollow. Because it was. She was manufacturing inspiration. I was filming real people. And the more her brand grew, the more she tried to attach herself to mine. I caught wind that she'd reached out to the tourism board I was working with, asking to collaborate on a new regional video campaign. She even offered to fund one of the small businesses I'd featured, under her personal brand, of course. That's when I called Grant again. I think she's trying to buy her way into the story. He sighed. I figured she might. Can you do me a favor? I asked. Make sure she's at the gala. Make her believe she's still involved. He didn't even hesitate. Already done. So we laid the trap. On the gala's official website, he let her name stay up until the week before the event. Just long enough for her to keep planning her grand entrance. Just long enough for her to order that designer gown and book a blowout. I finished editing the final cut of Hidden Hands the night before the event. It was a 7-minute short film. No narration. No dramatic score. Just music, motion, and faces. Laughter. Tears. Hands kneading dough. Paint splattering on canvas. A girl teaching her younger brother sign language. A farmer wiping sweat from his brow as he harvested lettuce under the California sun. When I watched it back, I cried. Not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. Every frame, every breath, every story told with reverence. The next night, I suited up and showed up. The gala was held in a rented vineyard estate overlooking the ocean. Crystal chandeliers hung from the trees. Waiters glided past in black ties carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres I couldn't pronounce. The whole place smelled like money and lavender. Layla was already there. She stood near the entrance, laughing too loudly, her dress hugging her like armor. Brendan hovered nearby like a loyal puppy. She hadn't seen me yet. Grant greeted me near the bar, looking effortlessly sharp in a tailored navy tux. You ready? He asked. I nodded. She's going to lose it. She won't have time to. At precisely 7:45 p.m., the host of the gala took the stage to welcome the guests and introduce a very special keynote speaker, a local filmmaker whose work is redefining how we tell community stories. I walked up. Layla's face in that moment, frozen, disbelief, horror. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her eyes darted to Grant, then to the crowd, then back to me. I took the mic. My heart was calm, my voice steady. And as the lights dimmed and my film played, I stood at the edge of the stage, not looking at the screen, but watching the audience. Watching their faces shift. Watching them lean in. Watching them feel. When it ended, the applause didn't stop. And Layla? She wasn't clapping. She was seething. But I wasn't finished. Because the next phase of my plan had already begun. The applause was still echoing when the lights came back up. I stepped forward, gave a small bow, and thanked the crowd. Every instinct in my body told me to walk off stage, take a drink, and let the night end on that high note. But I didn't. I looked at Layla. She stood near the back now, frozen between two donors in sequined gowns, her champagne glass trembling ever so slightly in her hand. Her smile, the polished, pageant-perfect one she always wore at events like this, was cracked at the corners. That glassy stare? That wasn't fury anymore. It was fear. She knew something was coming. I gave my closing remarks. Kept it professional, heartfelt, and tight. Storytelling doesn't belong to the rich. It doesn't belong to the elite. It belongs to the people who live it, who struggle, who create, who keep going even when no one's watching. Thank you for watching. I stepped down to a standing ovation. And then the real show began. While the guests moved toward the reception hall for dinner and dancing, I waited off to the side with Grant. He handed me a glass of sparkling water and nodded toward Layla. She's trying to find someone to yell at, he said, deadpan. She can wait, I said. The next part goes live in 10 minutes. See, while everyone had been watching the film, my assistant, one of the film students Grant helped bring in, had been working behind the scenes. He uploaded a second video, one not meant for the big screen, but for the internet. A digital autopsy. The truth behind the brand, manufactured empowerment, and stolen stories. It was a 10-minute exposé, built meticulously over weeks. It showed, side by side, clips from Layla's new inspirational brand, Brendan's shaky attempts at recreating my visuals, and the original work he copied. Shot for shot. Same angles. Same color grading. Even the same background music, lifted from my lesser-known projects. Then came the interviews. 3 small business owners, all of whom Layla had reached out to with promises of sponsorship and visibility, only to ghost them after they declined to hand over exclusive brand rights. One woman, a single mother running a flower shop, tearfully described how Layla tried to co-opt her personal story for a Mother's Day campaign. Another revealed Layla had demanded final edit approval on a video that was supposed to be a collaborative piece. I'd sat down with each of them, recorded their testimonies, and let them speak in their own words. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't exaggerated. It was simply the truth. The video dropped at exactly 8:30 p.m. on every social platform I had access to. Scheduled posts, pre-linked by Grant's media team, went live on his company's Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn accounts. I had my own post go out, too. Simple black text on a white background. Not all stories are earned. Some are stolen. Here's what that looks like. Watch here. #StoryMatters, #CommunityOverCloud. Within 5 minutes, my phone started vibrating nonstop. Mentions, comments, shares. By the time I reached the main hall, Layla had already seen it. She was standing at a corner table, whisper yelling into her phone, while Brendan hovered nearby like a kicked dog. Her face was white. Her hands were clenched. I approached calmly. She noticed me and straightened up, trying to collect what was left of her pride. "You think this is funny?" she hissed. I didn't smile. "I think people deserve to know who's using their stories to build a lie." She scoffed, eyes darting around to see who was watching. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "Yeah," I said. I held a mirror up. "You didn't like what you saw. You destroyed my career." "No, Layla. You did that." I just hit play. That's when Grant stepped up next to me, calm as ever, holding a glass of red wine like it was just another Friday. "Oh, by the way," he said to her, "since you're here, my lawyers finished the paperwork this morning. You'll find the full divorce agreement in your inbox. Please sign it within 48 hours. If you delay again, we'll file through the courts." Layla's jaw clenched. "You're siding with him now?" Grant raised an eyebrow. "You cheated on me, then tried to erase the only person who told me the truth. Of course I'm siding with him." "And the money?" she snapped. "You just gave him $1 million? Think of it as redistributing wealth," he said, "to someone who actually earned it." She took a step back like he'd slapped her. "I made you who you are," she spat. "Before me, you were just some awkward nerd in ugly blazers." Grant smiled. Then I guess we're both better off now, huh? I expected her to storm out. But Layla doesn't know how to leave quietly. She made a scene. She raised her voice. Accused me of hacking her files, stealing her brand, colluding with her ex-husband. The irony of her using the word stealing wasn't lost on me. She screamed that I'd always been jealous, that I was bitter and lonely and would never be anything without her shadow to define me. People stared. Phones came out. And right there, in that pristine ballroom under the golden chandelier, Layla Bennett melted down. She didn't realize Grant had already pulled his name from every business she'd piggybacked on. The shared investment accounts? Closed. The PR agency she'd leaned on? Dropped her that morning. She had no platform left to scream from. She walked out of that event red-faced, sobbing, with Brendan trailing behind her like a broken toy. And me? I stayed. People came up, shook my hand, told me the film moved them, asked how they could support the Hidden Hands initiative. One couple offered to fund a second round of stories. A gallery owner asked if I'd ever considered a full installation. The ride home was quiet. Grant and I didn't say much. We didn't need to. He dropped me off with a nod. You did good, Eddie. I nodded back. You too. By the next morning, the expose had over 500,000 views. Articles popped up on local blogs. Layla locked her socials. Brendan deleted his entirely. My mom tried calling twice. I didn't answer. When she texted to ask, "Why are you doing this to your sister?" I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. A week later, I signed the lease on a new studio space, my own. Sunlit windows, exposed brick, room for interns and gear and growth. On the wall above my desk, I framed a still from the film. The fisherman in his boat, smiling in the orange morning light, casting a net into quiet water. He didn't know I'd used that shot, but it captured everything I'd fought for. And as I sat there, sipping cheap coffee in my own space, my phone buzzed. An email. Subject: documentary funding proposal accepted. Grant had done it. The fund we'd talked about. It was live, fully backed, and I'd just been named its first creative director. I stared at the screen, took a long breath, and smiled. Layla tried to erase me. Instead, she made me impossible to ignore. And that was the last time I ever lived in anyone's shadow.